Since the dawn of humanity, long before science labs and brain scans, people have lifted their eyes and their hearts towards something they could not see. They have prayed. Christians, Muslims, Jews, Hindus, Buddhists, Sikhs, indigenous peoples, ancient civilizations, even people who say, "I don't believe," but still whisper, "Please, let this work out." Prayer is one of the oldest human behaviors we know, but why do people pray? Is it just tradition? Is it psychology? Is it biology? Or is it truly a doorway to something beyond ourselves? In this video, we explore prayer through science, philosophy, religion, and human experience, what it does to the brain, how it shapes the mind, why it has inspired poets, philosophers, and ordinary people for thousands of years. This is why people pray. For millions of people, prayer is first of all about connection. In Christianity, prayer is a conversation with a living God. Not just a distant force, but a father, a friend, a presence that listens. In Islam, the daily prayer, Salah, is a direct line between the worshipper and the creator. 5 times a day, the body and the mind realign to remember, "I am not alone." In Judaism, prayer is woven into daily life. It is gratitude, lament, and responsibility, a way of partnering with God in repairing the world. In Hinduism, prayer can be directed to many forms of the divine, to Vishnu, Shiva, Lakshmi, Ganesha, each symbolizing a different aspect of reality: protection, abundance, wisdom, new beginnings. In Buddhism, prayer often takes the form of mantras. Words are repeated not to control the universe, but to transform the mind. Even outside formal religion, many people say things like, "I talk to the universe," "I send out good energy," or "I speak to my higher self." Different words, different images, same human instinct, to feel that someone or something is listening. But what really happens in our mind? For most of history, we could only guess what prayer does inside the brain. Today, scientists can literally watch the brain in action while people pray. Neuroscientist Andrew Newberg has scanned the brains of Buddhist monks in meditation, Franciscan nuns in contemplative prayer, and other people engaged in deep spiritual practice. The results are fascinating. When people focus deeply in prayer or meditation, areas in the frontal lobe, the parts responsible for attention, planning, and self-control, become more active. Regions linked to emotional regulation and a sense of peace also light up. Some studies suggest that these practices strengthen the brain networks responsible for managing stress and balancing emotions over time. In intense mystical experiences, activity in parts of the brain that define where I end and the world begins can decrease. People describe this as a feeling of unity, of oneness with God, with the universe, with everything. Science does not tell us whether God is real or not, but it does show that prayer is not just in the imagination, it leaves a real footprint in the brain. Psychologists have been studying prayer for decades. Many studies have found that for people who are religious or spiritual, prayer can reduce stress and anxiety, help people cope with difficult events, increase hope and optimism, support emotional regulation, and contribute to overall well-being. One large study of daily life found that when people used prayer as a way to cope with stress, they often felt more supported and less overwhelmed by their problems. Other research has shown that religious or spiritual coping can soften the impact of trauma, illness, and major life changes. Of course, not all forms of prayer are helpful. If someone uses prayer to avoid taking action, or believes they are being punished by God, that can increase guilt and distress. But when prayer is practiced as trust, surrender, reflection, and connection, it often becomes a psychological anchor, a way of saying, "I am not carrying this alone." One of the most controversial questions is, can prayer change physical outcomes? Over the years, researchers have run randomized clinical trials to see whether intercessory prayer, prayer offered by strangers for patients, affects medical results. Some early studies suggested a small positive effect in heart patients who were prayed for compared with those who were not. Later trials, however, either found no significant effect or mixed results. Systematic reviews of these studies generally conclude that the evidence is inconclusive. Some scientists argue that trying to test God in a lab may misunderstand what prayer is really about. Whether or not prayer can make a tumor shrink or change a blood test remains deeply debated. But there is one area where science is much more confident. Prayer can change people, how they feel, how they cope, how they face illness, fear, and pain. Sometimes the most profound miracle is not that a situation disappears, but that a person finds the strength to walk through it. Long before we had therapists, many people had prayer. In the Christian tradition, believers are invited to pour out their hearts before God, their grief, their guilt, their hopes. In Islam, dua is a deeply personal form of prayer. A person speaks to Allah as to the one who knows every thought, every fear, every secret. In many African and indigenous traditions, prayer is not just spoken, it is sung, danced, and cried. Emotion moves through the body. Pain is carried by rhythm. Hope is carried by the community. From a psychological perspective, this makes sense. Prayer creates a safe container for emotions that might otherwise stay locked inside. It offers a space where a person can say, I am terrified. I am ashamed. I am grateful. I don't know what to do. And they can say it without being interrupted, judged, or analyzed. Prayer can be the most honest conversation a person has all day. Throughout history, people have turned to prayer when they stood at a crossroads. In the Hebrew Bible and Christian tradition, prophets and ordinary people alike seek God's guidance in moments of danger and decision. In Islam, there is a specific practice called Salat al-Istikhara, the prayer for guidance, offered when someone faces an important choice. In Hinduism, people may pray to Ganesha before a new project or journey, asking that obstacles be removed and wisdom be given. Psychologically, prayer for guidance does something powerful. It forces us to slow down, to reflect, to admit that we don't know everything. Studies on decision-making and reflection show that when people pause, step back, and consider their deeper values, they often make choices that fit better with who they truly are. Prayer creates that pause, that inner stillness where clarity can emerge. Sometimes the answer does not feel like a voice from heaven. Sometimes it feels like a deep sense of peace about one option, a sudden insight, or a quiet realization. This is the path I can live with. Prayer is not only personal, it is also cultural, historical, ancestral. In ancient China, emperors led elaborate ceremonies to pray for harmony between heaven and earth. In ancient Greece, people brought offerings and prayers to temples of Zeus, Athena, Apollo, and others, seeking protection, victory, or healing. In many African, indigenous, and Native American traditions, prayer is directed to ancestors, spirits, and the Creator. The living stand in a long line of generations, and prayer keeps that line alive. When a grandmother teaches her grandchild a prayer, she is not just transmitting words, she is passing on identity, memory, belonging. Sociologists and anthropologists point out that shared rituals like prayer strengthen social bonds and provide a shared meaning in times of joy and crisis. When people pray together, they are not just speaking to the divine, they are also saying to each other, "We are in this together." Not all prayer is spoken. In Zen Buddhism, long periods of silent sitting are a central practice. No requests, no lists, just awareness. In Christian contemplative traditions, practices like centering prayer invite the person to rest silently in the presence of God beyond words and images. In many modern spiritual paths, people combine mindfulness, breathwork, and gratitude as a form of wordless prayer. Neuroscientific studies show that these contemplative practices can calm stress-related brain circuits and support long-term emotional balance. Silence becomes a healing environment for the nervous system. In the silence of prayer, some people say they feel held, seen, loved, without a single word spoken. Philosophers and writers have wrestled with prayer for centuries. The American philosopher and psychologist William James, in The Varieties of Religious Experience, called prayer the very soul and essence of religion. He did not try to prove whether God exists or not. Instead, he studied what prayer does in the lives of those who practice it. James observed that for many people, prayer seems to release new energy, a kind of inner strength that was previously blocked. From a philosophical point of view, prayer is not just asking for things. It is a way of rearranging our own inner world. Mystic poets have also tried to describe prayer. Writers like Rumi saw prayer as a longing of the soul for its source, not a transaction, but a love story. In novels and poetry, we find characters who pray not because they are sure, but because they are desperate, or hopeful, or simply human. Prayer appears as protest, as surrender, as poetry, as conversation with the unknown. Whether you believe in God or not, prayer has shaped how humans think about meaning, suffering, and hope. Here is a fascinating fact. Even people who say, "I don't believe in God," sometimes pray. They may not call it prayer, but in moments of crisis, the words still rise, "Please let her be okay." "Please not this time." "Please, I'll do anything." Psychologists sometimes call this implicit religion, deep patterns of hope and appeal that appear even when formal belief is missing. This suggests that prayer is not only about doctrine, it is also about the basic human impulse to reach beyond ourselves when life feels too big to carry alone. So after science, history, philosophy, and personal stories, why do people pray? They pray to feel connected in a lonely universe. They pray to find calm in the middle of chaos. They pray to release emotions that have nowhere else to go. They pray to ask for help, for meaning, for direction. They pray to stand with their ancestors, their communities, their traditions. They pray to touch mystery. Science can show us what happens in the brain. Psychology can show us what happens in the mind. But prayer also lives in the dimension of meaning, in the questions: why am I here? Is anyone listening? Does my life matter? Whether you see prayer as communication with a loving God, as self-reflection, as meditation, or as a beautiful illusion, one thing is clear: prayer has shaped how human beings face suffering, celebrate joy, and search for hope. Maybe in the end, the question is not only, does prayer work? Maybe the deeper question is, what kind of person do we become when we pray? Because if prayer makes us more compassionate, more grounded, more courageous, more at peace, then perhaps, in a very real way, it is already changing the world. This is why people pray.